But let's go to the top spiel. Matt Ford wrote a really great article on the top spiel. You missed it because of a personal reason, right? So you decided you had to stay in Scotland. But thankfully we had Matt Ford there. And I thought his article was bang on. That's on the Substack right now. I really felt that this game got thrown away by Xabi Alonso in the most unnecessary way possible. All the dominance that Bayer Leverkusen had over a Bayern Munich team that was visibly exhausted, and was on the ropes throughout the entire 90 minutes. And I still don't understand, in a situation where you need to win, you leaving Boniface and Schick on the bench for the full 90 minutes, and with 3 minutes to go, you bring on Patrick Schick to try to get a late winner. I didn't quite put it in words like that for the article that I had to write for Forbes, and Mark Ford didn't quite put it the same way either in his article. I'm going to be a bit more frank on this podcast. I think that's criminal, Stefan. That is just not... That is tactically absurd. in a game that you're chasing, where Bayern Munich had no business walking away with a point from this game. And it did because Leverkusen opted to play without a number 9.
Yeah. It was an extremely frustrating game from a Leverkusen point of view. An extremely relieving, relieving, that's not a word, gratifying game maybe from a Bayern Munich fan's point of view. They don't often get to watch their team with their back against the wall for 90 minutes and somehow get out of it with what is necessary. They're usually the team doing that to other teams, obviously. It's a really difficult game to analyse, I think, and to kind of look back on, because it really did hang on a knife's edge for much of the game. I think tactically, Leverkusen, at least in the first half, did things more or less perfectly. I think they completely overran Bayern. They bullied them off the ball. They took the ball off them. They controlled possession. They created chances. Nathan Tellett should have scored. Frimpong should have scored. I thought Florian Wirtz was incredible in the first half, to be honest with you. I don't think Bayern could get anywhere near him. I made a joke on social media at half-time. I was like, the only way Bayern are going to stop Wirtz tonight is if they buy him at half-time. And then I thought, if Uli Hoeneß was still calling the shots at Bayern, he probably would try that. He'd probably march into the Leverkusen room.
I bet you he was on the phone from the Tegernsee the moment the halftime whistle blew.
Yeah, exactly. He would have marched into that dressing room with a checkbook and said, name your price. But the problem is that, I think the tactic was working so well. I think there was definitely a reluctance from Alonso to change things, because he thought, we just need that final step. We just need to get over that final hurdle, and then we basically played the perfect game here. And I think it was quite telling that he didn't make a single substitution until the 87th minute. Just think about that. Not even didn't bring on a striker.
Yeah,
he didn't make a substitution, period, until the 87th minute. And I think that just screams a head coach who was just waiting for the game to sort itself out. He was too reluctant to throw caution to the wind and change a system that was obviously working very well against Bayern Munich. Now, I think Bayern fans could argue, look, we didn't have to win this game.
And they're right.
Yeah, and, you could certainly argue that they didn't play well, quote-unquote play well, because, they didn't have to control the match, didn't have to pass the ball around and stuff. I'd say they more or less rode their luck for the most part, but it was as we said, as we chatted with the subscribers, it was almost identical, or rather the mirror opposite of the opposite fixture, where Leverkusen basically did the exact same thing at the Allianz Arena and left with a point. And we said that night, look, Leverkusen were terrible, but they took a point. They'll be happy with that. Yeah. That's Bayern Munich's fault. So it's only fair that we do the exact same thing. I didn't think Bayern played well at all. I thought Harry Kane was dreadful. I thought Bayern's front line did very little. I thought the midfield was humbled by that Leverkusen attack. And, I didn't think Ito, Kim, Leimer, even Upamecano to a large extent played well at all either. Even Manuel Neuer, to be honest with you, was kind of whiffing crosses at times, and he wasn't even making connections with them. So from top to bottom, I don't think there's a single real Bayern player in that team who really held their head up high and played well that night. But Leverkusen, it was almost like Leverkusen won the game and then lost it on their own without really Bayern having really influence in it. Leverkusen had the opportunity to win that match, and that was by bringing on Patrick Schick, Victor Boniface, whoever else, to shake things up. Because for all Nathan Tella did, and I thought he did a decent job in kind of being the first kind of trigger in that press. He obviously just doesn't have that attacking intent. And too many times for Leverkusen, this has been something that's dogged him throughout the season, and is something that I've always had issue with the player himself, is that this system always seems to lead to Frimpong being one-on-one with goalkeepers or in attacking positions, and he just doesn't have the composure to hit those shots. He just doesn't have the technique to be a goal scorer. And, people always say, like, every time the transfer window comes along and people are like, oh, where do you think Frimpong will go? And he's valued at 50 million euros, he's 60 million euros. Oh, I hear Liverpool want him, I hear Man United want him. And I always say, nobody's buying him because he's such a specialised player. He can't play fullback, and I'm not even sure he can play winger. So unless you're a team that plays specifically with wing backs and are willing to take advantage of Frimpong's very specific skill sets, he doesn't fit in your system. And I think Leverkusen, and I think Alonso's done a tremendous job of getting the very best out of Frimpong, but that game, I think, underlined why he isn't a winger, or why he isn't a striker, or why he isn't a goal scorer. And I think it was just very frustrating that it was he and Nathan Tella and Grimaldo and whoever else that were getting into these positions because guys like Patrick Schick and Boniface were on the pitch. So I completely agree with you to a large extent. It's the game that Xabi Alonso, I guess the way I would put it is that it's the game that Leverkusen dropped 2 points in rather than the game that Bayern bravely fought for the point that they won. It felt like Bayern were at the mercy of Leverkusen, and Leverkusen just couldn't land that killer blow.
Well, I mean, they just had to ride out the storm, right? Considering the schedule that Bayern Munich have at the moment, the fact that they had that Celtic game, Stuttgart, Frankfurt are next, right? And so it's not getting easier for them, and so I just sensed that they were okay. We just need to write this out, and if we get just a point here, then that's great, because that keeps them at 8 points. And at this stage of the season, if they beat Stuttgart and Frankfurt, and then this is wrapped up. And there's lots of subscribers in our chat who are like, oh, this isn't over, and I'm like, yeah, it is. Like, hey, they can draw against Frankfurt, Stuttgart, and Leipzig, drop 6 points, and still be 2 points ahead of Leverkusen. And that is only if Leverkusen win all their remaining games. And I just don't think they're as clinical this year. I mean, there's two moments that it kind of burned into my head over the last 180 minutes of Leverkusen football, is that twice the ball fell to Florian Wirtz in the final seconds of a game, and twice he put the shot wide. And both times, whether it was against Wolfsburg where he put it wide or against Bayern Munich where he put it wide, that ball would have been in last year. And then we would talk about a completely different points deficit to Bayern Munich. It'd be 4 points now, right? If my math is correct. No, 3. Either way, we would be the conversation now would be very different. We say like, oh yeah, Leverkusen have opened up the title race again. Like there they are. They're scoring late goals again. They're totally on fire. They're gonna ride this out. They're gonna slowly rope in Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich have tough games now. What if they drop another 2 points against Stuttgart? What if they drop points against Frankfurt? Which I personally think is entirely possible. Bayern Munich have a very tough schedule with lots of games. It's entirely possible what we saw against Leverkusen this weekend is going to happen again to them. In the next little while, but it doesn't matter. The cushion is so big, it doesn't matter. They can afford to drop points now, right? They've earned the right to play a game like they did against Leverkusen, and do Leverkusen what Leverkusen did to them at the Allianz Arena half a year ago, because they have been very efficient. they have gotten the result that they needed. And, we had this discussion about Florian Wirtz and Jama Musiala. Like, that ball falls to Jama Musiala, I think it goes in. And just because of the way he's been playing this year. This game, he wasn't good. Neither was Harry Kane. I actually think we need to talk about Harry Kane, his fitness, and the way he looks at the moment. He looks a lot more like Niklas Süle than Harry Kane, to be quite honest with you. There were some shots of him in his jersey that were not favorable. And I don't know where that's coming from and the kind of discussion that will lead to in the next coming months. But, Jama Musiala, he has scored important goals for Bayern Munich that have led to wins in games. Like, the one against St. Pauli comes to mind. The one he scored against Dortmund that led to a draw, that's an extra point that they needed, right? Those are the moments where he has popped up. And although he hasn't been good, he wasn't good last year. I think personally he and a lot of the other guys at Bayern Munich are simply overplayed, and that could hurt them later on. But the cushion is just too big now, Stefan. This was the opportunity for it. If Leverkusen had brought it back to 5 points, and even then it would have been almost a mission impossible. I would have said, okay, maybe it could happen because Bayern Munich's schedule is going to be grueling from here on out. But it didn't. They wasted our opportunity. And what bothers me, and I think all the praise that we give Xabi Alonso, and I think he's an amazing coach. I think he's going to be a world-class coach, and he's going to be incredible, and he's going to do incredible things. But he reminds me a lot of what Pep Guardiola did at this stage of his career too, that sometimes he overthinks it, right? He doesn't have, Jupp Heynckes towards the end of his career, and by the way, Jupp Heynckes made the same kind of mistakes early on. That's why he got fired at Bayern Munich in the early 90s, right? Because he also made those kind of mistakes. He overthought it at times, That was often a joke, that he would overthink things and didn't make the gut decisions. Jupp Heynckes Xabi Alonso doesn't have the ability to listen to his gut yet. I think that comes with experience when you learn certain situations. But this game was screaming for a striker.
Mm. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, I mean, I take your point about the Wirtz one. It's one that you would totally expect him to knock into the back of the net just because of how well he's been playing for Leverkusen. And we've talked about this time and time again. How many times have we been on the show and said, Leverkusen just play like a team who just give the ball to Wirtz and then say, right, go win the game for us. And he's done it time and time again for them this season. And I mean, my heart goes out to the poor guy because he's having to basically single-handedly in that game beat Bayern Munich to keep their title challenge alive. And the only players he has in support are Granit Xhaka, a defensive midfielder, two fullbacks in Grimaldo and Frimpong, and Nathan Tella, who was a converted winger who, is a decent off-the-ball, he's a water carrier, but he's not a goal scorer. He's not racking up the goals this season. And then he turns to the bench, and who does he see on the substitution board? Emil Adley coming on. I mean, Adley, and then
so infuriating.
I've got to say, like that Wirtz miss did Adley a huge favour because 5 seconds before it, Adley's right in front of goal. He connects with a cross and he completely fluffs his line, hits it right at Manuel Neuer. That's the chance that Frimpong, Patrick Schick or Boniface finish. If they're on the pitch, that's where Leverkusen get their goal.
100%.
Everyone's calling them Leverkusen. They get the winner. And, we kind of continue on talking about this.
We sit here and praise Xabi Alonso for waiting to bring on Patrick Schick in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah. Well, no, but like, I think he should have brought him on like 70 or 80th minute, to be honest with you. Yeah. But it's an interesting kind of situation that both these clubs are in right now. I think Bayern deserve a huge amount of credit, or rather, Vincent Kompany deserves a huge amount of credit for the way that he's built a team that is so clearly designed to be consistent and to win the Bundesliga. And that's his first and foremost task this season. It's not to win the Champions League. They'll obviously do as well as they can in the Champions League, but he clearly hasn't. Either he doesn't have the capacity yet with the players or his coaching style or maybe his own abilities as a head coach. But as you've seen in big one-on-one games this season, Bayern very rarely impress, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. I think if we say they've had maybe 7 or 8 big games this season, I think I've seen them impress in maybe 2 of them. And I'm talking about all the Champions League games and games against like Leverkusen, that Dortmund game, obviously, against Frankfurt, stuff like that in Stuttgart.
They're pretty boring. Let's be honest.
Yeah, they are. And they just kind of grind out results the way that we've kind of been used to Bayern always doing that in the Bundesliga. And then you look at Leverkusen, and they're a team who have struggled for consistency. And we kind of said this after the game, like, as you said, even if they had won this game, it's still 5 points. That's still a monumental task for anyone to overcome, to beat Bayern to the Bundesliga title stage of the season. So you naturally have to go beyond that and think, well, actually, it was that draw to Wolfsburg, it was points dropped to Bochum, to RB Leipzig, Kiel. That's where Leverkusen lost the title. And that's because they are not a team designed for this kind of consistency to kind of roll over teams.
Enough, last year they were.
Yeah, last year they were. But last year they had goal scorers. They had Boniface scoring goals for fun. And they just had a lot more about them. They had, obviously, defence that did lead goals as well. But the kind of conclusion I came to after the match, chatting to our subscribers in the chat, was that I think this Bayern team are better set to win the Bundesliga, and I think this Leverkusen team are better set for knockout football in the Champions League. And it'll be really interesting to see how far Leverkusen can go in the Champions League. Now, I've watched them in person get absolutely obliterated by Liverpool at Anfield, and I'm willing to say, look, Liverpool are probably the best team in Europe this season, perhaps, at least in the top 2 or 3 . So that's not the fairest yardstick to judge them by. But I can easily foresee a situation here where Bayern walk to the league title, they get knocked out of the last 16 in the Champions League to a good team, but finish like 10 points ahead of Leverkusen in second place. But then Leverkusen, go on a really decent run the Champions League and get to like the semi-finals or perhaps even the final of the Champions League.
Munich.
In Munich, yeah, exactly. I know that sounds crazy because, we just spent 20 minutes about how Alonso kind of choked on his tactics, but I do think this team's just purpose-built for one-off games, whereas the Bayern team is just purpose-built for grinding out results week after week after week. And one's designed for league football, one's designed for cup competitions, I think. And we'll just have to see how it plays out, I guess.
I actually think the Bundesliga title is going to probably be closer than people think, but I think it's still too much for Leverkusen to overcome. I think this Bayern team looks very exhausted and jaded. I think the top players are overplayed. I don't think there's enough players in that team that can score in important games. It's essentially if Musiala and Kane are not at 100%, they really struggle for goals, which is why they resorted to the tactic that they resorted to. And that's fair enough. Like, I no criticism at all. I know a lot of people online took Kompany apart for what he did. I personally totally understand it. I think he used the weapons that he had at his disposal to get the result that he needed, right? Just as Xabi Alonso did in the return fixture when they weren't at their best. And that's fair enough. I have absolutely no problem with that. And I think that, even though I do think this Bayern Munich team is going to run into trouble in a couple of months, I think it won't matter because it's going to be too late for anyone else to utilize from it. And I guess that is the title probably wrapped up, unless there is some sort of monumental breakdown by Bayern Munich. I think this is it. Just looking at the match days, Bayern Munich play, I believe, Eintracht Frankfurt next Sunday at home. That's on the back of the Celtic game, right? Which I think they're going to go comfortably through. And then they have Stuttgart in Stuttgart. And Stuttgart can be, it depends which kind of Stuttgart team we're going to get. Although Stuttgart more time now to rest, right, in between matches. I think that matters. And then it's Bochum. That's, I think, an automatic 3 points. Even though, we said that they were good today. Then it's Union Berlin. Union Berlin haven't been really good. Then it's St. Pauli at home. I assume they're going to win that. And then you have Augsburg. I mean, like, where are they going to drop these points, Stefan? And then Dortmund on match day 29. The way that Dortmund have played this year, Dortmund are going to win that.
Yeah. You can bet your bottom dollar on that.
Yeah, just because it is. But I don't think it will matter. And then, I personally think it's probably wrapped up. So, if you're a Bayern Munich fan, you can rest comfortable. I know a lot of people that we talk to in our chats, they're still kind of restless and they want to have drama, but yeah, you're not going to get it this year. I'm sorry.